Doctors and endos everywhere are messing up type 1 diabetics' lives by giving them the wrong amount of insulin. I want you to watch this episode in its entirety to find out if your doctor or endo has set you up for success or failure with your insulin dosing requirements. Today, I'm going to walk through the exact mathematical equation for how you can identify how much insulin you should be taking and if it's been wrong this entire time. Because if you're taking the wrong amount of insulin, your blood sugars will literally never be fully in control. In fact, you might be having experiences with some pseudo control where it feels like things are almost controlled, but there's an underlying secret that is wrecking your success with type 1 diabetes. Now, I'm going to give some examples from my own life, my client discussions, and I as well. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Vandevect. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist and best-selling author of a type 1 diabetes book. And I live with type 1 diabetes as well. So I'm going to be sharing with you from a research perspective, but also, of course, from personal experience. So hope you enjoy this one. We're going to dive deep into a little bit of the equations that I believe will help you set you on the right path for success with your blood sugars. Hope you enjoy. Let's start with our theme song and then get into our story. Here's what changed, what's going on, right? And of course, we use blood sugar formulas. That's why my book is titled The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, which, by the way, if you haven't grabbed that yet, you're going to see why in this episode. It's critical that you grab your copy and read through it because things have changed with type 1 diabetes and how it's managed. No, but what I want to talk to you about is actually the weight gain. It took me, unfortunately, about 2 weeks to identify that in my own life. And this is why it's important to reassess your insulin needs, your insulin-to-carb ratios, your basal or long-acting insulin relatively frequently. And what I had overlooked, but thankfully eventually pinpointed, was my weight gain had impacted my insulin needs, which brings us to our first equation for today. And if you are new here, diabetes is based off of math, like the whole thing. This is why we use blood sugar formulas, which is something that I discovered many years ago when I almost died from an urgent low in a different country. Terrifying experience, but to a certain degree, I'm grateful for it because it kicked me into research mode. And of course, now here we are talking about what I discovered. So looking at blood sugars as equations, one of the equations that your doctor or endo was taught, hopefully, I guess not all of them have the same level of education, but while that needs to be addressed, we are going to share that there is a way for them to initially assess how much insulin you probably need, right? And upon diagnosis, most of us were told, here's your insulin to carb ratio, here's how much insulin you should take per day, let us know how it goes, right? And unfortunately, that's a pretty common set of instructions that we were given. Was basically, hey, take this much insulin, we'll see if it works. And then it's your job to go for a test drive and be the test dummy, right, in this ride for our life. But what we understand, of course, is that there are averages, but that does not give us the specifics on what we need to manage our diabetes tightly. And that's what I'm after, is how can I precisely manage blood glucose in a way that allows me to have more freedom and flexibility with my choices, because I am not a robot. I like going out for pizza every once in a while. I like enjoying life and not being restricted and locked into a specific diet or lifestyle because of type 1 diabetes. That being said, our first equation is if you want to find out the estimated total daily dose, or your TDD, for your insulin needs, you take your body weight in pounds and divide it by 4. And this should be your total daily dose for a 24-hour period of time. So in realistic terms, what that means is that if you were somebody who weighs 200 pounds, you would take 200 divided by 4, which would give you 50. That means that you would be estimated to need about 50 units per day, 50 units of insulin. Even within weight as a topic, we need to draw an important distinction. Is it 200 pounds of pure muscle as an athlete? Is it 200 pounds of pure fat? Is it a mixture of both, right? And it's important that we look at this and really all of diabetes through this lens of it depends, because with the weight example, if it's 200 pounds of pure muscle uptakes glucose from the bloodstream independently of insulin, which means without additional insulin, muscles actually assist in lowering blood sugar levels. Whereas if it's 200 pounds of fat actually increases insulin resistance, making you need more insulin to keep blood sugars level. And it's creating a new problem, right? So these important distinctions are great for us to look at as examples, because all of diabetes is like this. Anytime I get a question from my clients, my answer usually starts with, it depends. And that's why it gets interesting, right? But blood sugars in general, this is why cookie cutter formulas and standard medical advice as it stands is not as helpful, because those are static equations, right? And this is exactly why we use blood sugar formulas, because formulas allow us to be more dynamic in our approach, to change our strategies as the situations change. Now, the trick is that that's not just take 50 units and go along on your path, right? Most of us know there are more nuances to type 1 diabetes, like when to give insulin, how much to give, what type to give. So I do want to draw a distinction to this in just a moment, but before I do, for our friends who use kilograms, I do want to address this as well. The conversion is kilograms multiplied by 0.55. Okay, so if you're in pounds, you take your body weight in pounds divided by 4. If you're using kilograms, you use kilograms multiplied by 0.55. Okay, there's that distinction for you. I hope you guys appreciate that. Now, what I want to draw a distinction to as well, though, is it's not just about total insulin, your total daily dose, or TDD, but instead also about where that insulin comes from, right? Does it come from my basal profile, or my long-acting if you're on injections, or does it come from my insulin-to-carb ratio and how much insulin I take at mealtime? Now, in the doctor's office, because they're giving generic advice, right, or endocrinologist office as well, the generic advice that they're told to give you is that that total daily dose should be split in half. 50% goes to your long-acting insulin, or your basal profile if you're on an insulin pump, and 50% goes to your bolus insulin, or your prandial insulin, which is mealtime, right, your insulin-to-carb ratio. Now, there are a lot of problems with this, and if we were to go into the subtle complexities and nuances of type 1 diabetes management, we could go into what types of foods require more or less insulin, which types of diets are better or worse. In fact, if you want something like that, I can do a part 2 on this and make it a series, but I need you to comment and let me know. Okay, because if this is not of interest, I'm not going to waste my time. I want to do what's helpful for you so that you can see success. So if you'd like to see more about the complexities of nutrition, how to master your insulin to carb ratio, maybe even bring into the conversation the insulin to protein ratio, insulin to fat resistance ratio. See, it gets complicated. Let me know. I do need that to be something that you add in the comments to give me that feedback. Otherwise, I have no idea how to help you best, right? But to give you an idea of the complexities behind this and why this is the incorrect information, these generalities just don't work. Cookie cutter approaches are a thing of the past with type 1 diabetes. They only work with hyper restrictive routines and diets and schedules. It's a nightmare, right? With new data that we have and research and experimentation I've done on myself, and then a lot of my clients have performed as well. In fact, this was a conversation in my Warriors Inner Circle. It's my private clients that I work with directly to help them set up their blood sugar formulas for optimization, where they can do what they want, eat what they want, and everything stays pretty darn controlled, right? We discussed this idea that the total daily dose is heavily impacted by things like your weight. And ultimately, your insulin needs are going to fluctuate based off of where you're at on the insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity spectrum. There's a lot of different rabbit holes we could go into on this topic. We're not going to, but I will touch on it and say that you are not insulin resistant, or yes, let me rephrase that. You are not yes or no with insulin resistance, where a lot of people think you either are or you are not, but rather you are more or less insulin resistant than the previous day or the previous month, right? So our insulin resistance can change day to day based off of our decisions, based off of environmental factors, based off of our foods, our activities. So instead of how much insulin should you take for the rest of your life, It's more of a question of how much insulin should I take today, which does mean it's impacted by far more than just your body weight. But your body weight is one of the key indicators that allows us to make an educated guess, right? So when I gained 13 pounds, I did gain insulin resistance alongside of that. There were some pounds were fat, okay? They were not all muscle. So along with that, I had to make some adjustments, which means I had to either raise my insulin to match the new level of insulin resistance, right? Or I had to adjust other lifestyle factors. Again, part 2, or I'll make this a series. If you guys would find that valuable, let me know, okay? Now, when weight increases, most of us see an increase of insulin, which is also why we have that equation. Total weight in pounds divided by 4 equals total daily dose split in 2, 50-50. Now, to touch on the 50-50 split and why it's also completely inaccurate is that your insulin needs are going to vary dramatically based on the type of diet that you follow, because there is no longer a standard diet for type 1 diabetics, because we recognize there is freedom that we can gain and flexibility with proper blood sugar formulas, right? So when we understand that really any diet is an option for us, we can choose whatever we want, whatever we feel best with, we recognize as well that insulin needs change dramatically as they follow that. So prime example, we'll use 2 polar opposites. This is how I like to compare, just to give you really clear examples, right? We have the ketogenic diet, the goal of which is, of course, to be in ketosis, extremely low carb, high in fat, okay? Doesn't mean it makes you fat. It means you are consuming lots of fat content, okay? So we have the ketogenic diet, fat, high fat, and we have, let's say, a high carb, low fat diet. So we have high fat, low carb, and high carb, low fat. What's really interesting is that total daily dose will actually drop for both of them when compared to the standard American diet, which is, I like it, the food's good, but it's a nightmare for your metabolism. Okay, let's just be real. But what's interesting is that the ketogenic diet has virtually no bolus insulin, right? It's very heavy on the basal, because you're not giving large amounts of insulin prandial, or to cover a mealtime carbohydrate content. Instead, it's heavier on basal because fat, and of course the protein consumption as well, is going to impact blood sugars at a much slower rate, so you're more reliant on your basal or your long-acting insulin. And the only insulin you might give outside of that are occasional corrective doses when protein converts to glucose hours later, right? As compared to a high carb, low fat, there's not going to be as much insulin resistance from the fat because it's low fat, but you do have the glucose that you have to store. So you do have to take more insulin for the glucose, but your basal rates might be lower. So there's different reasons that both of them see less insulin, but the insulin is going to be organized into different categories based on which diet they follow. So when somebody says your insulin needs to be 50-50 split, 50% for your mealtime, 50% for your long-acting or your basal, I say it's total crap, right? Because depending on what diet you follow, you might need heavier allocation to your basal if you're a higher fat, higher protein type diet, or you might need a higher allocation to your bolus insulin, right? So it's skewed because for a higher carb diet, you would need more bolus insulin to cover that glucose that's converting, right? So that's just one of the subtle nuances. In fact, I cover a lot of this in my book. I have one right here, The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. Okay, we talk a lot about the spectrum of insulin sensitivity versus insulin resistance, and ultimately how if you can target and understand that spectrum, you've already beaten like 80% of the battle, right? Like that's a huge chunk. If you can understand how your insulin needs are changing on a day-by-day basis in some cases. Now, I'm being a little bit dramatic to draw attention to this nuance because it does cause frustration, but the reality is most of us don't see a massive swing in our total insulin needs on a daily basis, though, as I mentioned, lifestyle shifts, right? You change your diet, you change your exercise volume, you change your sleep schedule, your stress level at work. A lot of these different factors, if there's a big shift, you will see a matching big shift in your insulin needs, right? So I saw my weight increase and my insulin needs alongside it mirrored that, and I had to match my insulin. Now that I'm losing some weight again, we actually just launched a type 1 diabetes weight loss challenge. We just completed it last week. It was a blast. I'm showing them what I'm doing to lose the weight again, get back to a good spot. And as we're losing weight, we have to match our insulin needs to that weight loss. Otherwise, our body's going to fall back into homeostasis. We're going to have to treat low blood sugars and bring them right back up. And then, of course, calorie count goes up and weight follows with it. So a lot of times, this is why people see frustration with weight loss, is because they don't match their insulin needs to their ever-changing variables. So the more variables we have in life, the more chaotic blood sugars can seem. Now, I say seem because there are reasons for every blood sugar, and until you know those reasons, they will continue to mystify you, continue to frustrate your everyday, where you're wondering, why the heck did blood sugars not cooperate? I thought I counted my carbs. I thought I took the right insulin. The reality is you took the right insulin for a previous situation, but now the situation has changed. You just don't know what to look for yet. And that's what this book is going to help you to identify, right? Where you can start looking for the right things. I slept less. Because I slept less, I increased cortisol production. Increase of cortisol increases insulin resistance. An increase of insulin resistance means I need more insulin, but if I don't know that I need more insulin, my blood sugars are going to be higher when I wake up. So because I slept less, I'm going to wake up higher unless I've taken more insulin. Right? So there's ways to balance this stuff out, but if you're ignorant to the variables at play, you'll never know what to balance or when to make those adjustments. So it can get incredibly frustrating, right? And that's a big part of why we try to demystify this with blood sugar formulas. If you don't know how those work, obviously the book's going to help you with that, or you can just go back in these episodes, start watching / listening to as many of these as you can, or best case scenario, reach out. My team and I will see if we can help you with this stuff, because it is crazy complicated, but that's why we've put a decade plus of research and experimentation into this, so we can start to break down those walls and make it make sense, give you a bit more confidence behind those numbers. So all in all, obviously, as you can tell, there's a lot that goes into this, and we're just scratching the surface, by the way. I don't say that to intimidate you, to say that you can't control type 1 diabetes, but rather that it needs a specific blueprint that is also custom tailored to your needs, because each of us are different. For example, I gained 13 pounds. You didn't do that in the last few weeks. Hopefully. I don't know. Maybe it did, right? But you've got other things at play. Maybe you're super stressed out at work, and that's part of your blood sugar formula. Maybe you are sleeping less, and that's making you more insulin resistant. I don't know what you're going through. And that's where this book is going to fill a lot of the gaps. But even still, it's just a book, right? There's going to be some introspection. You got to look at your own life and apply the concepts from this book in order to see results. I know a lot of you have already bought the book, brought it to bestseller, which was amazing. I hope that you're actually reading it and implementing the lessons from the book. Out of those 10 chapters, there are key insights and takeaways that are actionable in each chapter that I need you to apply to your life to get the most value. Extract that value from the book. If you have not gotten it yet, this is your sign. Go grab it now. It will demystify and unlock so many different pieces of diabetes that will make it make sense and empower you to live your best life with type 1 diabetes, to truly give you that freedom that I talk about in all these videos. That's why it's called the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. Literally gives you the keys to the kingdom, right? But you got to get the book and actually read it and then actually use it. So this is your sign. If you haven't yet, grab the book, go to Amazon or your bookstore, your favorite one, the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. Okay. If you already have the book, read it, use it, and review it. Okay, that's what's going to tell somebody else who doesn't know who I am or what we do inside the Renegade Warriors tribe. It's going to tell them that it's worth giving it a shot, right? And give an honest review, obviously. If it's helpful, I want them to know that. And I want you to use it so that I can actually give you the gift of that freedom formula through implementation. Okay, so understand, yes, weight loss is part of this equation for me. Might not be for you, but what you want to consider right now is, what are things in my life that might adjust my total insulin needs, right? What's making me more insulin resistant today? What's making me more insulin sensitive today? And understand as well that every blood sugar you see has a root cause. It has a meaning. In fact, every blood sugar we experience is the culmination of all of the different blood sugar variables acting on our blood sugars in that moment. So right now, I just checked my phone. I have a blood sugar of 90. That's the result of my workout today, of the foods that I ate today, of my stress level, my hydration level. So many things at play. It's not just, did I take enough insulin? Right? So if you can understand that, your insulin needs are constantly in flux. And it's not that it's impossible to control, it's our job to solve the puzzle. And the puzzle can truly be as simple as, is it more or less today? And if you can understand that, guarantee you that type 1 diabetes will be simplified. Bonus points, that's the subtitle of the book. So full circle, we've done it. I really hope this one was helpful for you though. And again, if you want to hear more information on in a part 2, right, where I go deeper into nutrition, how different nuances are impacting your insulin to carb ratio, insulin to protein ratio, all of those different pieces, let me know. And let me know what else that you find in this episode that stands out to you so I can have that feedback to bring more valuable content to you. All right. So this is your big spotlight moment. What's making my insulin needs change? They are not static. Okay. They must be reassessed, especially in big lifestyle shifts. So for me, I gained some weight. I stopped working out like an Ironman and saw a shift in my insulin needs as well. Your shift might be different, but keep an eye out for it. Go grab the book so you know exactly what to look for. The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. I hope you enjoy. Hope you found this useful. And if you haven't yet, consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stick around for more of these. We'll see you next time and keep up the fight.